district public school students, which is still taxpayer money as opposed to Boston public schools. That's kind of sums up a lot of it. Do I need to repeat it? Okay, so your position on charter schools, including the cap, right? And also, if you could, in your response, say something about the fact that the in-district Boston public school, charter schools thing, our taxpayer dollars are going to those as well.
Yeah, would you mind, Maura, just saying what the core question piece is? Are you asking about the cap lift itself?
What's your position on whether the cap should be increased? Should there be a cap at all? And the other is the fact that there's also some strong feeling here about the fact that the in-district schools receive a lot of the money so each of the students receives money for the charter schools, just as they do for the Boston public schools.
All right. Thank you, Advocate. Can we begin?
Well, first of all, Carbon Square is the home of a successful charter school, and I congratulate you, our principal, of that great charter school. But charter schools, I believe, pose a threat to the Boston public schools. Certainly, increasing the number of charter schools will indeed represent a drain on resources going to the public schools. And I believe it violates the initial purpose of charter schools. Charter schools were intended to be primarily experimental. They're not subjected to the same requirements of the Boston public schools. The teachers are not required to be certified. And very innovative things can take place within charter schools. But we're supposed to benefit from any best practices we learn from these experimental schools. They were never intended to replace or supplant public education. But the privatization of education in the city of Boston, I think long term, is going to lead to the deterioration of the Boston public schools, which should be the best schools in the United States of America. And there's room for experimentation within the Boston public schools as well, and we should support that. And let me be very clear and emphatic, so that there's no doubt in the minds of anyone in this audience, that I do not support the lifting of the cap on charter schools. I'm not in favor of reducing charter schools. Let's study their successes and their failures as we study the success and failure of the Boston public schools. But I would never support any effort that would lead to the demise of public education in the city of Boston, the birth of public education. Thank you very much.
So, I'm a product of Boston Public Schools. My older brother is a product of Boston Public Schools. Out of the system. The question for me is, what can we do? So in my plan, I actually put out concrete things I think a district city councilor could do to improve the quality of district schools. One is maybe exploring this idea of developing advisory boards. Orchard Gardens has an advisory board where people actually go out and bring in more resources through their networks into those individual schools. We could do the same thing here. I think that there are foundations, I know there are foundations of millions and billions of dollars that have money for educational purposes. I connected one of those foundations with the MLK school, which is in Grove Hall, because it had funding for summer program for kids over the course of this campaign. There are more opportunities that exist out there for things like that, and that's what I want to do, bring in more funding to those schools, be more creative in how we actually wrap services around the individual school, and at the end of the day, explore other options to improve the quality of schools so parents don't feel pressured to opt out of the system. Thank you.
Topics: family support, parenting, trauma, mental health, homelessness, or substance abuse. Andrea, you're first up.
First of all, that's a loaded question. Where do we begin with that? So that's a big question, but I will say this. Public safety obviously is a big issue, and it's one that we talk about a lot in this district. When I set out to run this campaign, people said, oh, don't talk about anything else but violence, violence, violence. And I said, no, I don't want to talk about just violence, 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 because this community is just not a violent community. So I went around the district, and some of the biggest things that people would like to see different in the public safety space are a few things. One is community policing, doing a better job of community policing. I door knock, and I have door knocked for the last, 8 months. I've been out there every single day. And I actually go into some communities where you see the same officers patrolling the same neighborhood. Sometimes they speak the language of that community. So for example, in the Bowden and Geneva area, there's an officer I see consistently who speaks Portuguese, which is a big constituency in that community. And he's there all the time. People know his name. You go to other parts of the district and you don't see officers, you don't see the same officers, you don't see people who look like people in that community. So I think we need to do a better job at actually increasing the number of officers so it's consistent across the district. I think we need to do a better job of recruiting officers that look like the people in this community. I think we need to do a better job of making sure that they come from the city of Boston. I think we need to do a better job in how we assess who should be a police officer. I was at a forum the other day and we were talking about the application process for becoming a police officer and whether or not we include things like unconscious bias and these various things where officers are coming into communities with some maybe possible discriminatory thoughts, racist thoughts. How do we address that in the assessment process? And when they're actually releasing to our community, they're actually releasing to the community and actually aware of what some of their thoughts are, preconceived notions about this community. I think we need to do a better job of engaging youth. I go to a lot of civic association meetings. Reverend Scott holds a good one, a youth reduction task force meeting, and I don't necessarily see young people in the room. My biggest thing with this campaign and in that office is to engage more young people, to be a part of the conversation. And we're talking about youth violence, we need to include young people. We're talking about youth perpetrators, we need to include young people. So I'm very passionate about that as well. And my time is up, so thank you.
Well, this is a somewhat complicated issue. I believe we should focus on taking preemptive steps. I don't think we should rely on a law enforcement model to deal with violence in the city of Boston. And to some, that may sound counterintuitive. I believe we should be investing in our young people. I believe we should improve the Boston public school system so that our children graduate from high school, either go to higher education, get a decent job, or even start a business. I think ultimately, that's going to go a long way to dealing with the issue of violence. However, all of us know that drug abuse is a major contributor to crime and violence. We also know that individuals seeking help should have the opportunity to have a bed where they receive treatment on demand. And I believe to finance that, we should take a look at the more than $4 million we have in the Law Enforcement Trust Fund. Use those dollars to support drug treatment programs. After all, those dollars come out of the community, should be reinvested back in it, in youth programs and drug treatment programs in the city of Boston. So I believe that we've made a lot of progress on the issue of community policing. I believe our police officers are much more sensitive to our communities than they were back in the 80s and 90s, and it's beginning to show. But let's invest in street workers as well, and interact and have these street workers become mentors to our young people. Thank you very much.
Safety question with affordable housing and gentrification in our community and the city at large. In your capacity, if elected, how will you or can you address this very real issue? We're talking about affordable housing, gentrification in the community and the city at large. If elected, how will you address this issue?
So, when I initially released my District 4 plan, I didn't have a section on affordable housing, and that was intentional. I was waiting to have more conversations with residents about the issue, waiting to have a sit-down and a sort of a working conversation with people in the district who are passionate about the issue and been working on these issues for a really long time. We had that, and about a month ago I added to the plan thoughts and ideas that I would like to pursue to, one, keep people in their homes, and also to make sure that there's more affordable housing coming to this district. So there's a couple of things that we can do. One is pushing for the Community Preservation Act to be adopted. It is one of the biggest sources of revenues that could come into a district to create more affordable housing. Councilor Flaherty pushed for it a few years ago. It was unsuccessful by a small margin. It's looking to come back on the ballot in 2016. This exists in other cities like Fall River and other places, and I think we could, as a district city councilor, we could push for that to make sure that we have more funding to create affordable housing. Looking at my notes here. I am for the Just Cause Eviction Ordinance, pushing for that to keep people in their homes. Four Corners just got funding, Coheath in Four Corners just got $1 million from the state. And they have been trying to actually buy foreclosed properties from Fannie Mae for a long time, and they were actually rejected. They just got $1 million from the state to help them do that work. And what is it that they do? They buy properties where tenants are facing foreclosure. They buy them, they renovate them with the hopes of giving them back to these same residents. I'd like to see that sort of program expanded across District 4, not just in the Four Corners area. I think we need to do something about fees. The newest thing is landlords charging fees to tenants. You've been living in a place for maybe 6 years, you paid no fee for your pet, you paid no fee for storage, and all of a sudden you have these new fees. The city councilor could push for us to do something about that. And lastly, I would say when it comes to affordability, developers come into community meetings, and to my surprise, at many of the community meetings, we don't see a butters in the room pushing back on developers to say, that's not affordable for this district. People can actually push back like they do in Jamaica Plain. They have an advisory council. We could be creating those to push back on developers to make sure that what's coming in the community is truly affordable for this community. Thank you.
Well, of course, one of the reasons we face the issue of gentrification in this community is because we've been successful in creating an environment for investment, particularly with the establishment of the Fairmont line. Back in 1985, I made a commitment to the people of this district that we were going to have some MBTA stops, some commuter stops along what then was called the Midlands Branch Railroad. Later became the Indigo Line, now we call the Fairmont Line. Because it was unjust for that commuter line to sail right through the heart of our community without making one stop. So we began with the Morton Street stop and the Evans Corner stop, and today, thanks to the support from state legislators and federal government, as well as the city of Boston, we have a stop at Talbot, Bernard, we have a stop at Four Corners in Geneva, we have a stop even going down to New Market, so you can access South Bay. That has contributed to an overall attractiveness of our community to the point that the cost of housing is skyrocketing because we no longer have rent control. So, whenever there's development in this city, not just in this community, I will push for 1/3 affordable, 1/3 moderate, and 1/3 market. And